Welcome to the deep dive, and today we're diving deep into psychology. Specifically, we're taking a look at these excerpts you've shared from a self-teaching guide. Sounds like you're ready to unlock the secrets of the mind.
Yeah, there's some really interesting stuff in here, definitely enough to get us started.
Perfect. So, right off the bat, this guide hits us with the definition of psychology, and it says, the science that studies the behavior of organisms. So it's not all just like dream analysis and couches then.
Well, dream analysis is part of it, but you're right, there's a lot more to it. This definition tells us psychology is all about using those scientific methods like observations, experiments, that sort of thing, to figure out why we do what we do.
Okay, makes sense. And it's not just us, right? It's about understanding behavior more broadly.
Absolutely. It's about all kinds of organisms, not just humans.
That's super interesting. So how do psychologists actually go about doing that? Like, what's their approach?
Well, that's where these four goals of psychology come in. To describe, explain, predict, and control behavior. They all kind of build on each other. You got to describe what you're seeing before you can even try to explain why it's happening.
Okay, so describe and then explain. What comes after that?
Prediction. Once you've got a handle on the why behind behavior, you can start to get a sense of what might happen in different situations. Like if you know someone's scared of spiders, you can probably predict they'll freak out if they see one.
Yeah. So even understanding a little psychology could help someone navigate those situations a little better in the future.
Exactly. And then, last but not least, there's controlling behavior. But before you go all mind control on me, this goal is more about using psychological knowledge to help people make positive changes.
Oh, okay. So like a therapist helping someone get over a phobia, that would be controlling behavior, but in a positive way.
You got it. It's all about empowerment, not manipulation.
This is already making me see psychology in a whole new light. Feels way more practical than I initially thought,
Well, it's definitely a field with a lot of real-world applications, for sure.
for sure. Okay, so we've talked about what psychology is and why it matters. Now, let's dig into the how. You've shared some interesting stuff here about research methods, so why are these methods so important to understand?
Well, think of it this way. You mentioned wanting to understand people better and quickly, right?
Yeah.
So imagine you're scrolling online and see some headline about a study on relationships. Knowing how those researchers got their results helps you figure out if it's even credible.
It's like knowing the source of your news. Just because it's published somewhere doesn't automatically mean it's true.
Exactly. And one method that's super relevant to, your desire for practical knowledge is naturalistic observation. Basically, observing behavior as it happens naturally out in the real world.
Oh, interesting. Can you give me an example of what that would look like?
Sure. So say you want to understand how people act in a supermarket, right? A researcher using naturalistic observation might hang out in the aisles, not in a creepy way or anything, and just observe.
Just blend in and take notes.
Yeah, exactly. They might pay attention to things like shopping patterns, how people interact with each other, even how they react to those sales displays, all that good stuff.
That's pretty clever. So it's about observing behavior in context without interfering,
You
right?
got it. It's a way to get those real, authentic insights into how people actually behave, not just how they say they behave.
I bet you get a much more accurate picture that way than just relying on people to remember what they did after the fact.
Oh, absolutely. And this whole idea of how we observe and interpret the world around us, that ties directly into the next big topic this guide covers, sensation and perception.
All right, let's dive into that then. So what exactly is the difference between sensation and perception?
Okay, so think of sensation as your senses taking a snapshot of the world, right? Lights hitting your eyes, sounds are vibrating your eardrums, that's all raw sensory data. Perception is how your brain then takes that data and makes sense of it.
So sensation is like the raw ingredients, and perception is the finished dish.
That's a great way to put it. But here's where it gets really interesting. The guide talks about this difference between the geographical world, meaning what's actually out there, and the psychological world, which is our own experience of it.
I think I see where you're going with this. It's like our own experiences, they color how we see the world, right?
Exactly. Two people can see the exact same thing, but walk away with totally different interpretations based on their past experiences, beliefs, even just their mood at the time.
I can see how that would be a recipe for some misunderstandings, for sure.
Oh, definitely. And it highlights how important it is to remember that there's always more than one way to see things.
Definitely something to keep in mind. So how does this tie back to wanting to understand people better and quickly?
Well, if you're aware that everyone's walking around with their own unique psychological world, it can help you avoid jumping to conclusions.
Mm.
And it can make you a better communicator.
I love that. Okay, we're going to take a quick break here, but when we come back, tell me all about those Gestalt laws. Because I've heard of those, but I'm a little fuzzy on the details. They have something to do with how our brains perceive the world, right?
They do. It's all about how our brains are wired to seek out patterns and try to create order out of chaos. Get ready for some serious aha moments. So you mentioned wanting to understand people better, and these Gestalt laws, they can actually be super useful for that. They're all about how our brains try to find patterns and make sense of things, even when things are kind of messy.
Okay. Yeah, I remember learning about those optical illusions, where you see a shape even though there are gaps in the lines. Is that what you mean by finding patterns?
Exactly. That's the law of closure in action. Your brain's like, hey, I know what's supposed to be here. And it just fills in those missing pieces to create a whole picture.
So our brains are like constantly trying to connect the dots.
Precisely. And it goes way beyond just visual stuff, too. Think
Mm.
about how quickly we form those first impressions of people, right? We pick up on a few things, what they look like, how they sound, maybe a couple things they say, and our brain's already off to the races trying to fill in all the gaps, create a whole personality based on, like, almost nothing.
Wow, that's kind of amazing and a little creepy at the same time.
Yeah, definitely makes you think. But that's why it's so important to be aware of those tendencies, right? We're making assumptions and judgments all the time based on, like, very limited information.
So how do we avoid falling into that trap, like jumping to conclusions about people based on those first impressions?
Mindfulness.
Yeah.
Question those assumptions,
Mm.
you know. Look for more information before you decide anything. Just remember, there's always more to the story than what you see at first glance.
Don't judge a book by its cover.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so shifting gears a bit here, let's talk about something I think you'll find pretty intriguing, parapsychology. You've got some stuff in this guide on ESP and psychokinesis.
Ooh, yeah. This is where we get into the really mysterious side of things. Telepathy, mind over matter, it's all so fascinating, even if it's a little spooky.
It definitely captures the imagination, right? But the guide stresses how important it is to approach this stuff with a healthy dose of skepticism. Just because someone believes they've had some paranormal experience doesn't make it automatically true.
So how do we separate what's really paranormal from, like, I don't know, someone just having a really vivid dream?
Well, that's where the research comes in. Parapsychologists use controlled experiments. They look at the stats, all those scientific tools, to see if there's actually any evidence to back up these claims.
And what have they found? Like, are we any closer to proving that ESP is real?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The research is definitely ongoing, and there's still so much we don't know about the human mind and what it's capable of. But so far, nothing totally conclusive. There have been some interesting studies, but nothing that definitively proves ESP.
So it remains a mystery for now. But why do you think these ideas are so sticky? Like, why do people still find them so compelling even if there isn't a ton of hard evidence?
That's a really great question. I think it speaks to something deep within us, like this curiosity about the unknown, wanting to believe that there's more to reality than what we can see and touch. It's the same drive that's fueled exploration and discovery forever.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. This whole deep dive has felt kind of like an exploration. We've covered so much, from the very basics of what psychology is to some really big questions about consciousness and how we perceive the world. But you know me, I'm always looking for that practical knowledge. What's up next on our agenda?
Well, since you're all about practicality, let's talk learning. This guide goes into some pretty fascinating stuff on classical and operant conditioning. Remember Pavlov's dogs.
Oh yeah, Pavlov's dogs, that always stuck with me. But how does that apply to us? I mean, it's not like we're like drooling at the sound of a bell in our everyday lives.
Well, you're right. We're not exactly drooling at bells in our daily lives, but classical conditioning is happening all around us all the time. You just got to know where to look.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Think about this. Have you ever noticed how, like, a certain smell, it can just instantly take you back? Like back to a specific memory, maybe even brings up a certain feeling?
Oh, absolutely. Like the smell of my grandma's cookies, it always makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside.
There you go. That's classical conditioning, my friend, shaping your emotional responses without you even realizing it.
Yeah.
That smell, it got paired with all those positive experiences from your childhood, and now it's created this powerful link in your brain that's still there today.
Whoa, that's kind of wild when you think about it. So even when we think we're not actively learning, our brains are still making these connections behind the scenes.
Exactly. Now, operant conditioning, on the other hand, that's a little more conscious.
Mhm.
It's about how the consequences of what we do end up shaping our behavior in the future. Do something you like, you're more likely to do it again, right? But do something with a negative outcome, probably not going to be so eager to repeat that.
Makes sense. Like, if I touch a hot stove and burn myself, I'm probably not going to be rushing to do that again.
Right. That burn, it acts as a punishment, which decreases the likelihood you'll repeat that behavior. And just like classical conditioning, this is happening all the time, shaping our habits, our routines, who we are, all that.
This is seriously making me rethink everything. Okay, so how can we actually use this knowledge, to our advantage?
Now you're asking the right questions.
Hmm.
Understanding how this stuff works, that's powerful. Want to break a bad habit? Think about those consequences and then find ways to, like, reinforce the behaviors you do want to encourage.
So it's like give yourself a little reward for a job well done.
You got it. Positive reinforcement. It can be super effective both for yourself and, for others too.
This is all starting to click now. Okay, so this guide you shared, it also talks about motivation, and I'm curious what actually drives us, like what makes us tick.
Well, on that really basic level, it's those biological needs, right? Hunger, thirst, sleep. Those are hardwired.
Hmm.
But we're also driven by these psychological needs, things like our need for achievement, that desire for connection, wanting to feel like our lives have meaning and purpose, all of that.
So it's about more than just like surviving, right? It's about actually living. Right?
Exactly. And these psychological needs, they're often shaped by, our experiences, how we were raised, the culture we live in. What really motivates one person might not even be on the radar for someone else.
Right. That's a good reminder that everyone's different. Everyone's got their own unique set of motivators.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And understanding those underlying motivations, that can be so helpful in like every aspect of life. Personal stuff, professional stuff, all of it. I can definitely see that. Now, we can't really talk about human behavior without touching on emotions, right? They seem to be behind so much of what we do.
Absolutely. And this guide, it delves into some fascinating theories about how emotions actually work. One that tends to trip people up is the James Lange theory. It basically says that our bodily reactions, they actually happen before we consciously experience that emotion.
Wait, really? So you're saying, like, we don't cry because we're sad. We feel sad because we're crying.
That's the gist of it. It's a little weird to wrap your head around at first, but think about it. Our bodies are constantly reacting, right? Our heart rate goes up, muscles tense up, we start sweating, whatever it is. This theory is saying that those physical changes, that's what our brain picks up on, and then bam, we've got that conscious experience of an emotion.
So it's like our body's giving our brain a clue about what we should be feeling.
Precisely. Now, that's not to say our thoughts and beliefs don't play a role, because they definitely do. But this theory, it highlights just how strong that mind-body connection really is, how intertwined they are. That's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. Okay, we've got to wrap up soon, but I want to touch on one more thing before we go. What about intelligence? This guide mentions it, and I've always wondered, like, what is intelligence exactly? Is it just about being book smart?
That is a great question, and one that, honestly, psychologists have been debating forever. It's more than just, knowing a bunch of facts or acing a test. It's about your ability to learn from your experiences, to solve problems, to adapt to new situations when things change.
So it's like being resourceful, being able to roll with the punches.
Exactly. And yeah, while our genes certainly play a role, intelligence isn't set in stone, thankfully. It's something that we can nurture and develop throughout our entire lives.
That is encouraging. So it's never too late to learn something new, to challenge yourself mentally.
Never. In fact, embracing lifelong learning, that's like the best thing you can do for your brain. Seriously.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive today. It's been amazing exploring all these facets of psychology with you, from the very foundations of the field to some really thought-provoking concepts about how our minds work, how we behave, all of it.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I always love a good deep dive into the human psyche.
And for you, dear listener, we hope this deep dive has ignited a spark of curiosity, maybe inspired you to learn even more. Because understanding psychology, it's about more than just memorizing terms and theories. It's about unlocking a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
Well said. Until next time.